So today I want to take a look inside of a BedJet. This is the BedJet3 Climate Comfort for Beds. We want to see if it's worth the almost $500 price tag. We do see it actually cheaper on BedJet's official website. We just kind of want to look inside of this today and maybe see some of the pros and cons of owning this system. We see here it can heat, it can cool, supposed to help eliminate body sweat, easy to install. And honestly, with just a little bit of research on their website, you can tell that this is not an air conditioning unit. It does state plainly, even though to me their commercials may not really show that, and a lot of the advertising in general. With a little bit of research, they do tell you that it's not an air conditioner. You need to be under 78 degrees in your bedroom. And also, they're not hiding that it might be a little bit different experience for some people, so some may like it, some may not. They warn you not to surprise your partner with it, but they do claim it helps with sweating and possibly sleeping poorly. Looks like they're stating it was invented by a former NASA spacesuit engineer, which a lot of these claims here may make you think it is like some special air conditioning all-in-one there, but we know that's not the case. So full disclosure, I ordered this from eBay as non-working, so I picked this unit because it looks almost brand new. Definitely want to look inside and see what we find today, but I believe it's going to be in good shape. Hopefully we won't be disappointed. One way to find out. Let's get it on the bench. I'm going to remove the filter here. I'm not sure if it's got a clip. It looks like it's magnetic, and I do like the way the filter is. Easy to clean, and you can tell there's very little dirt on the filter, so probably not used much at all. Let's go ahead and remove these 4 Phillips screws on the back of the unit. We'll speed up through some of this to save some time on video. And we also have at least 4 on the bottom. Yeah, those look like they're just bumpers, and it's probably only 4 screws. You got the 4 in the back and the 4 on the bottom towards what I'm calling the front. And by the way, this is the nameplate on mine, so it is 3S800NA. I know it's the Gen 3. Not sure about 800 because it's probably more than 800 watts NA, probably North America. But let's flip it over and actually take the top off. And there we go. We do have some material here for noise abatement, for some sound dampening. It'd probably be like a subwoofer enclosure without that. So that's a good design. That's the first plus. As we look inside here, not many surprises. We have the fan and shroud here. Looks like a heating box, and we have a control board. Not really looking like $400 or $500 worth, but we're just getting into it. So we do see that we have a temperature sensor for our inlet or incoming air in the back that follows along to the board. We also have I'm going to call this a dual temperature sensor going to the front. We shine a light behind here. You can see that it just has the typical heating element, like PTC element design to it. We'll look at that closer in a bit, but just a really quick look inside, and the sensor goes right to the middle of this cone. That's neat. So yeah, I imagine we're going to see the elements look very similar to just a cheap $20 to $40 heater like this Amazon Basics, for example. I mean, I know it's a custom housing and all for it, but we're not talking about extreme cost here or nothing that's elaborate in design so far. I'm going to just slide this board up and out, and by the way, you can see the plug here. I'm unplugged. I didn't mention it, but you can see the plug there for safety. I'm going to cut the tie wrap so we can take this loose. We also have some silicone on these connectors. I'm going to have to peel that off. And there we go. There's our temperature sensor. This is the connector for our DC fan motor. This is our heater wires, at least most of them. And this is our small temperature sensor that goes to the back or the inlet. This is our ribbon cable. Let's take it loose from the board. The front board is nothing more than just push button and lights, and I think a USB jack. And this is one of those spade connectors. It's got the little clip. You got to squeeze the clip, and there we go. You just got to squeeze it like so. And we got our 2. This the incoming power. This the same way, and they're off like that as well. They're different widths, so you really can't get these mixed up easily. So here's our board. We see our input protection here, where our AC comes in the bottom left. We have high voltage capacitors and common mode chokes. Then we have a switch mode power supply for the board, and this is a close-up of some of those isolation slots. You can tell. I will say the board looks very high quality. The solder joints look great. A lot of screen printing on the board. Some conformal coating, which I did expect. This microcontroller is made by Sino-Wealth. First time I've ever heard of them, but they might be very common. It's an 8051 microcontroller with 10-bit ADC, or analog to digital converter. On this side of the board, we see this little daughter board that mounts on here, and that's probably going to have our communication on it. And yeah, there is our Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip. We'll get a little closer on this. And unfortunately, this is going to be a big part of this system because you can do nothing with controlling the unit on the display itself. You have to either be linked with your phone through Bluetooth or the remote that you can either purchase with the unit or decide to just use it with your phone. So keep that in mind. The screen printing here is very good on this board. You can see all the points here are labeled, and I do like that. Let's put this back on the main board. There we go, lined up. Just pushes back on. Let's take a minute here. These should be triacs, so let's get closer. Yeah, BTA08 800. So these are going to be snubberless, logic level, standard 8 amp triacs. So we have 4 of those. You can see here we have 4 pins, so it goes like so. The board is controlling these triacs, and the triacs are going out to these wires respectively. You see it is a 5-pin connector, but we only populated with 4 pins and 4 wires. So it goes like so. So that goes to the heater control. And of course that's our motor connector as mentioned earlier. The motor plugs in here on the control board. And by the way, when I mentioned the filter cover was magnetic, it is on the housing side is where the magnets are. And of course the filter cover itself pops on like so. So I do like that. Pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and remove this little back sensor. The wires just tighten down in place with a screw and a washer. We'll go ahead and put the screw back in there to keep up with it because it is an eyeball. I think we can leave this like it is and just unscrew the assembly from the housing. We just pull it up like so. This is the information from our motor. This is a 24 volt DC, 2.3 amp, 55 watt max, class E motor. It runs at 2250 RPM. On the other side, you can barely tell it, but this shows the wiring diagram. We have red to VM, black to VSS. So that's going to be powering our motor, the red and black. Blue states that it is for speed, and white shows FG for frequency generator. So that is our feedback. It's not unusual to see a fan motor similar to this. I'll try to show an example up on the screen, but a lot of these are just single phase AC motors. I don't believe I've seen too many of these being DC, so I think this is a specialty motor. I think that's mainly needed for tight temperature control, especially on the heat mode. Nothing's really left in the housing, but this little interface board, there's nothing on it but 2 push buttons and some lights and a USB port. So if we look at the fan blade, it's a composite, well-made squirrel cage design fan blade, and this motor has no movement. The bearings are in very good shape. I knew the listing said this unit had a fan noise, but it's not the bearings. We do see a thermal cutout or a thermal fuse down here. We'll look at that a little closer in just a minute. Let's go ahead and take this little thermal cutout on the side loose here. 2 Phillips screws, and this comes right off. And as suspected, this is a little thermal cutout. So we have this thermal cutout as well as the thermal fuse we've seen at the top of this housing. So we have temperature control as well as these cutouts built in as safety features. She's going to go ahead and put this back on since it isn't really much to it. Let's go ahead and take out the front of this heater housing. There's 2 on the top and 1 on each side. They are all 4 Phillips as well. And there's our heating elements. You can see our thermal cutout just as well right there on the inside. Oh, so we have a thermal cutout as well as a thermal fuse here. So the ones I'm referring to as thermal cutouts are bimetallic strip. So they of course reset automatically as they cool down. And the thermal fuse is a one and done. If it gets over, I believe this says 94C. Yeah, 94 degrees C. It will open up and the heater elements will no longer operate at that point. 15 amp rated at 125 volts. 94C. This is the part number for our heating elements. SVHTP 120700. So perhaps 120 volts, 700 watt. And of course we have our TGGT style fiberglass insulated wire that's going to these heating elements. The TGGT wire is typically rated at over 250 degrees C. It's nice the way they made this little frame to hold the elements, like so. If we ohm across the elements, we get roughly 140 ohms across the 2 outside, and then the 2 top, 67, 75. So that's 2 different elements together there, and here we have 133 across, and then 64 and 69. So that's 4 different elements all together. And of course we had 4 tracks, so that makes sense. The blue is going to be our common. It hits the middle on both. That goes through the first thermal, then goes through the other thermal, the backup thermal fuse, and then goes to the common on the board. That bottom connector that ended up being red. I'll try to share a quick schematic here of the heating element to show how it's wired up. So this is our front sensor. This is the sensor that actually feeds back for control of the temperature, whether cool or warm. It looks like a dual sensor, and it's pretty neat how they just mounted that in the center. And that metal frame automatically gives it a little bit of natural filtering or dampening. Let's go ahead and put this back together. We just got to put the elements back in this frame, get a little thermal cutout board in here. The wires come out like so. That goes together pretty easy. Get a couple screws in it here. Make sure everything's good, nothing's pinched, everything looks good. And that board just laid in there long ways. I'll try to have an up close picture of that on the screen. It just laid in there horizontally, and the wires come up through the corner like so. Let's go ahead and put the other 2 screws in. And we'll put this assembly back in the housing. We just got to move that wire out of the way. It's a little bit tight on the side there. We'll go ahead and put the 4 screws back in it. And here's our control board. The control board is a nice built board. However, I think I expected a little bit more for the price of these units, but it is a nice board. All of our high side is isolated pretty well. That's where our incoming power and our heater controls plug up. Going to go ahead and hook up our incoming power wires. We had the smaller one on the neutral side and the larger one for the hot, like so. And then this is the red wire that had the clip on it. That is our common wire that goes out through the thermals and then to our heating element where it turns into blue wires. Plug in the heating elements themselves here. And I think we got to get this cord turned sideways. They didn't leave a lot of room there for that housing. We'll go ahead and plug up the front board ribbon cable. And there we go. Now the board can slide in. I'm going to have to put some tie wraps on these wires. But I'm going to go ahead and plug the fan connector up like so. The main temperature sensors. Yep. And then this is our inlet air temperature sensor. I'm going to get some tie wraps. We don't want the wires to get sucked into the fan here. Just going to put a couple on here right quick. I'm actually going to undo these heater wires before I put this unit in use anyway, because we have no use for the heat. We don't even want it to get turned on accidentally, but I'm definitely going to plug them up for testing. So we're going to be careful here and just power it on. And one of the things I dislike the most about this design is you can do nothing from the front panel. If you don't have the remote or your phone linked to this unit, it is nothing but a paperweight. So I did order the remote separately. I could not get mine to work without it. It wanted to do an update and would not connect to my network. I don't think it had any major issues. It just wouldn't connect. It will not connect to a 5 gigahertz network. It's got to be on 2.4, which our guest network is 2.4, and it still didn't connect. So I'm just going to talk about it briefly, but I could have had 20 minutes of video, frustrating video of me trying to get this thing to work with our phones. I used Apple and I used Android, and I had luck with neither one. The unit refused to update and link up. And then one time I powered it on, it actually would link up and let your phone control it. Then ever since, it has not done it. We're just going to pair up this remote since it's brand new. Got to hold down the low power button. And there we go. Clock set. Believe it or not, it's 2024, and every time you lose power, the clock does need setting on this device. That's right. Go ahead and start the fan. Awesome. I do hear a little bit of growl in this fan, but honestly, it's not a bearing issue. I believe it is simply tuning. I don't have another brand new one to compare with, and don't know about revisions enough to say I couldn't even get this one to connect, obviously, but it seems like it's a tuning issue with the feedback and the control for this. It's not a mechanical sound, it's actually like speed control bumping, especially when it growls running slow like that. But nothing that I can't live with. I like a little bit of fan noise anyway. I'm going to clean this up and give it a try, as long as it works out fine and blows good air. I have to say this remote is very nice. It connected easy and it's smooth, and I do like the controls. And of course, keep in mind it's a lot louder without the cover on. We'll put the cover on later. It's actually a relatively quiet fan, especially when it's running below 30%. Go to heat mode. I do like the lights letting you know what's going on, even though that's going to be up under the bed, so for most of us you won't see that anyway. Go back to cool mode. So you can do a temperature set point, and you can just do fan percentage. Most likely we're just going to use a lower fan percentage speed. Yeah, that will give you a cool tip. Go back to heat mode just for testing here. We're also in low power mode on this first test, and low power mode being that you could have two units plugged into the same outlet if you had to, but you would have to run them in low power mode. Now unfortunately, low power mode is not a physical maintained button. You have to make sure you keep it in that mode if power cycles or anything like that, so just keep that in mind. We're around 9.25 amps, right at 700 watts. Only showing about 113 volts. That's because I got a little short 16 gauge extension just for testing here. Shame on me. I definitely wouldn't run it like that long term by any means. And I'll show you here with the remote beside it. We have it set maxed out at 104, 100% on fan. So this is going to be trying to reach 104 with the open end here. It's not going to make it. So it's just going to put out 700 watts as long as it can in this low power mode. Now we take it out of low power mode. We just have this on a dedicated circuit. It's a dedicated 20 amp receptacle just for this unit. Then we unleash all the power and set to 104. Let's go on up with the fan speed to 100%. We see it push towards 1,000 watts now. I figured we was using about half of the elements, and it looks like we could use, at least as far as the elements go, it looks like we could go up to maybe 1,400 watts, but it may be limited. Because we are maxed out on temp. I dialed it back a little bit after we got up to 102. Dialed it back. I'm going to dial the fan speed back, and you can see our wattage dropping on off. The controls do seem to work very well with this BedJet. We'll throw it back on turbo mode, and yeah, we definitely hit around 1,200 watts. Change the set point back down to like 90 degrees. Cut our fan down so we drop off really quick on the wattage. Let's go to fan mode. And yeah, we're down to like 20 watts. Now we cut the fan up, let's say all the way to 100%. Some of you might desire to know on the fan wide open what's the wattage, and it's only like 60 watts. We'll call that 60 to 65 watts, and probably will be less than that with the hose connected, because if you cover this type up, the current actually goes down. So just to show you there with the remote right beside it, at the moment we're like 61 watts. I'll be more concerned with this back getting covered by, say, a bed sheet, maybe some clothes that may have got on the floor and got pushed under the bed. You just got to think about that. You don't want the intake to get covered. I can see that making some thermal issues if this gets covered here in heat mode. But as far as this, it's going to be impeded some because it's going to be under sheets and pushing, and it's actually just going to make the fan work less. I'm going to cut my work light off so you can actually see the screen on the remote better, and with the fan at 100% and cool only. Let us know the lowest we can set it is 66 degrees Fahrenheit. When the outlet gets impeded or blocked a little bit, your current and therefore your wattage is going to go down. So just for example, if I put my hand over it here and just try to deflect it, you'll see here on the screen in almost real time it goes down almost half the wattage. So no real issue with impeding the front, but you definitely don't want to impede the back or let that filter get very clogged. So fan speed 25%. This is probably how this is going to run for most of us, just keeping a source of cool air coming up under the sheets. That is a very, very quiet fan. Every now and then this one that's faulty does growl, but still very quiet to me. I just want to keep this in low power mode. Not that it really matters for the fan whatsoever. Just in case you're interested here, at around 30% on the fan, we're at like 7.7 watt, so very, very low amount of power usage here. And if we turn it off, you might be interested to know that it is around 1.2 watts. So very low energy consumption. Of course, unless you're using it in heat mode. But as you can tell here, I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to undo the heat connectors and fold that under. Also going to put our inlet sensor back in place. Just tighten that screw down on the wire to hold it in place. So with our first look inside, is this thing really worth it? I mean, maybe. I really don't see enough inside to be anywhere close to $400 or $500. To be fair, it does have a really good temperature control, but these days that kind of stuff don't cost that much money. To incorporate it all into one, I could see this being worth up to $400 maybe. Just my opinion, my first look inside and testing of it. Of course, I don't have that much need for the heat either, and as many of you can tell, obviously I'm from the south. Probably my friends up north, y'all might find it way more necessary. But since it don't actually cool, it just brings you cool air in, like fresh air in. I really don't know why it's quite priced as high as it is. Your bedroom already has to be fairly cool for that to help much. So read this before you buy it, just so you're not disappointed with it. And hopefully you got a lot of information out of this video. And one thing, the Amazon price here of almost $500, I really don't know why it's that high. They're showing like it's on sale, and if you go to the official BedJet site, the stuff's already a lot cheaper. $429. I mean, that's a big difference. You can get it as low as $389, but again, that doesn't have the remote, and the remote's about $59. So I like the way the remote works. In the middle of the night, you grab it, it's motion activated where it lights up the screen. $59 is not a terrible price for that remote. And from what I've seen so far, after using it for a couple months while I'm putting this video together, I would definitely grab the remote for sure. You see here that they even have a refurbished one for $349 on the BedJet site. Of course, that does not come with the remote. One very positive thing I'll say about BedJet is their parts are very decently priced. So from air hose extension being $20, the remote is a really nice remote with $59. I think the air filter could be a little cheaper, but you're probably not going to replace it that often. It is a type that you can clean off, vacuum very easy. If it gets pretty soiled, you can even wash these type typically. Warm water in the sink, rinse and let it dry. You'll probably get years and years of use out of the air filter, so no real problem there, but the prices are fairly decent in that regard. And especially after I looked around on eBay a little bit, and of course I bought this one used and broken on eBay for like 60 bucks. So was looking for some deals on eBay to start with on parts. This nozzle head, for example, $50. This is a used nozzle head. What about a used hose? $50. What about a used remote? $74. So when you consider that BedJet will sell you the flat hose accessory for it, so it's even flat, takes up less room, has the nozzle and the hose for $50. I don't know how the eBay sellers are trying to get twice the price for used as BedJet sells it for. So kudos to BedJet for that. A little more detail about the flat hose if somebody's interested. I think $50 is not a bad price for that specialty item really. And of course the remote, as mentioned, $59. So what do we think about the design? So let me know in the comments what you think, but I think it is neat. It's all together. It has a purpose. I think many people can benefit from it. I don't think it's worth quite what they're asking for it, but I guess that's like a lot of things these days. My biggest gripe by far as the design of it is the front display has the button to turn it on and off, which is a problem I'll get to. You can't control this thing no other way. You have to have the remote or your phone connected to it. It's doing nothing else. So one problem with the button being on the front where it's at is in a situation with a power blip, storm, power outage, keep in mind 99% of these are under people's beds. And you absolutely have to push that power button on the front of this unit to cut it back on at 2 in the morning, at 3 in the morning, whenever the storm comes through. And the lights blink. If you want to ask me how I know that, it's because we've already done it several times. This time of year we get a lot of storms, this warmer weather, and I done had to crawl up under there and pull this thing out, pull the hose loose, because if it's mounted on the, I call the left side of the bed, facing the very bottom of the bed, with the hose coming up on that side, well obviously that power button is not going to be reachable from the outside whatsoever. You're going to have to pull the cord out and pull the unit out, which the hose is like an accordion to pull out and give you some slack, but you have to press the button. Sometimes the remote takes a while to connect. It's always going to have the time reset at 12 o'clock. It's like the 1980s on the VCR all over again. The time is not a big deal. Having to push that button is, and on one occasion I even had to reconnect the remote, but to be fair, it was 2 in the morning. Maybe I pushed a button I shouldn't have pushed, but again, it was 2 in the morning. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I think this is version 3, probably does have some improvements from 2 that I don't know about, but I do think there's much need for a version 4, and that is to take care of those problems right there, because to me that's a big problem. But there's also many other competitors out there as well. For us, all we need is a fan, and buying brand new, there's other options out there like bed fan. And I got to say, this design doesn't work well for people that might need it tucked under the bed, but at the same time it also is less protruding from the bed like the hose on the BedJet. So I do like the way they made the air duct where it kind of hugs the end of the bed. I do like that. I don't know if these will fit under every bed. And of course, you have to buy these in different height ranges because some bed heights are higher and lower. So know nothing about them, but if I had to buy a brand new, I don't know that I wouldn't look at something like this as an alternative, since I don't need the heat in Georgia. But that's just for us. They also make some just like water cooling and things of that nature that goes under the mattress or under your sheets that I don't know much about. But really just wanted to look inside of this BedJet today because I was curious about how they work myself. And of course, when I seen the very first advertisement for these, I thought they had some kind of cooling or at least a thermoelectric device, which I know that really will make a lot of condensation. That's how little dehumidifiers work actually. They're little thermoelectric devices, also known as a Peltier device. Or I thought maybe it had some kind of really special little heat pump inside that was kind of neat. You know, since you can buy like a window unit for about $200, I really thought for $500 you probably were getting something that, you know, may have had a little mini air conditioner inside or something. But yeah, condensation will always be an issue with something like that, and probably wouldn't be something to be under your bed, honestly. I'm going to have some links down in the video description just for reference on these, like the Amazon link for the BedJet that I really don't recommend for the price. And of course, I'll have a link to BedJet if you want to look at some of their stuff. But I hope you found this video helpful today. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to have some links down in the video description of some tools and items that I find very helpful on my workbench. Those links are affiliate links and they help support the channel, and I greatly appreciate it. So thanks so much for watching, and God bless.